12 Ukrainian drones are roaring in a Russian ammo train at 97 kilometers per hour and occupied Zaporizhia at 13:47 hours. However, the operators in charge of them are unaware that Russian artillery has already located them. The first 150mm shell touches down 800 meters away, which is close enough to knock dust off the ceiling. They were discovered by the Russians as soon as 48 brushless motors started up at once. Every sensor within 10 kilometers was illuminated by that electromagnetic spike, which was like turning on stadium lights. The operators can make a decision: continue under fire or abort and survive. It will take them around 12 minutes to get to the train. It might take 3 minutes for the Russian artillery to locate them. They choose to carry out the mission. When ABTR notices the drone swarm, it fires. The morning air is filled with tracers. In an instant, the configuration fractures. For straight through the center, for high, and for low. Rounds from machine guns fly through empty space. However, the Russians are unable to notice this. While Russian jamming floods every frequency with 10 rows of interference, each drone follows a fiber optic connection that is thinner than a fishing line. These wires are totally impervious and transport data at the speed of light. The $10 million electronic warfare vehicle beneath them could just as well be a pricey piece of paper. Russian artillery had located the operator's precise location and began bombarding the area as the drones were now en route. However, the Ukrainian operatives were ready for this. They set up shop in 3 different bunkers that were 500 meters apart. Here's why the particular distance was important. A fatal radius of up to 300 meters is produced by a 150mm artillery projectile spaced 500 meters apart. The others wouldn't be impacted by even a direct hit to one bunker. With extraordinary luck, the Russians might be able to destroy one bunker, but never all 3. In order to finish the task, 8 drones would always survive. The second round, which was closer, but still in search, landed 600 meters distant. The operator could now clearly see the target through the lead drone's camera. The train was emitting black diesel smoke. It was getting close to a location where the trail went straight over open terrain for 2 kilometers, too distant from defensive strong positions and too exposed for close protection. For weeks, the Ukrainians had researched this path. The duration of the window would be precisely 97 seconds. The third round struck 450 meters away, and everything was altered by this one. 3 fragments of the explosion as shrapnel struck their targets as it shot through the air at 1,500 meters per second. Drones 2, 5, and 8 have fiber optic cables. The cables, which were only 8mm thick, broke right away. These 3 drones instantly switched to radio control and backup battery power. However, this meant that they were now susceptible to jamming, with their fiber optic link still in place. The remaining 9 drones carry on sending data via light pulses that travel at 200,000 kilometers per second. Through glass, the decision to continue the mission while moving was taken by the personnel in Bunker 1. The 4th artillery round struck the ground a few meters distant as they were gathering their gear and moving to the backup position, but they had already left. Go to Bunker 4, which is located 700 meters east. Via the connecting tunnel, they wouldn't have the time to reacquire the artillery. The 9 drones that were still connected by fiber optic cables were impervious to the electronic warfare, even though 3 of them were now at risk. Noise can interfere with radio signals as they move through the air. However, fiber optic connections use light bouncing through glass fibers to convey data. Attempting to block someone's flashlight by yelling at it is analogous to jamming radio waves. To stop a fiber optic signal, there is just no interaction between the physics. But the 3 radio-backed drones were set to take their first major test at a distance of 7 kilometers. The Ir-330's the HSIL electronic warfare vehicle stationed at the rail junction identified the drone swarm and promptly turned on its transmitters. Every frequency between 100 MHz and 2 GHz was inundated. with 10 cows of electromagnetic energy, enough strength to overpower all GPS signals, radio communications, and commercial drone control channels within 30 kilometers after their wires were cut. The 3 drones that were using radio backup went dark right away. The other 9 continued, but their screens became static. As the system started to pump out even more energy, the operator in Zatel's command cabin watched his waterfall display shift. Every frequency had a jamming signal that was saturated. He has successfully produced a 30-kilometer wide electromagnetic bubble. 3 drone signals had immediately fizzled out on his sight, but 9 more continued to arrive with signals that were unbelievably clear. Perplexed, he examined his gear. After 10 cows of jamming, how were they still able to transmit? The operators experimented with all known military bands and frequencies ranging from 0.4 GHz to 5.8 GHz. Before long, the Zetal was using the whole spectrum to emit noise. It is similar to attempting to conduct a discussion in a room with thousands of speakers playing various tunes at full power. Now flying blind, the 3 radio-controlled drones continued on their final course until their batteries ran out, or they collided with an object. Here's the lovely irony of electronic warfare. Though it doesn't discriminate, systems outside of Ukraine were also impacted by Zatel's enormous jamming field. The BTR-8-8 crew at Checkpoint 9 attempted to radio a warning to the Panzer air defense system 3 kilometers away after spotting the drone swarm approaching on thermal imaging. Static. Nothing at all. The Ukrainian frequencies were as lifeless as their military radios. In an attempt to blind the adversary, the Russians had blinded themselves. The 9 drones with undamaged fiber optic wires continued to fly. It wouldn't matter if the Zetal produced 100 cows. The $10 million electronic warfare vehicle, which was intended to destroy NATO drones at a distance of 30 kilometers, was completely helpless against drones that were connected by what was essentially a very long fishing line. During his mission briefing, the train engineer pushed the throttles forward and issued a warning about potential drone activity. The convoy's speed increased from 42 to 48 kilometers per hour, then 50 kilometers per hour, and ultimately reached 56 kilometers per hour, which is the maximum speed allowed for 4,000 tons of goods on an age track. However, acceleration brought about a new issue. The intercept point moved 17 meters along the track for every kilometer per hour that was accelerated. The Ukrainian operators had to constantly recalculate, using battery power they couldn't afford to spare for each path correction. At Checkpoint 9, the BTR crew had precisely 8 seconds to engage. The drone swarm would stay in their engagement envelope for that amount of time as it crossed perpendicular to their position, in an attempt to determine the lead angle for objects traveling at 27 meters per second. The gunner traversed his turret. He had to aim 15 meters ahead of the drones at that speed and angle. He fired 800 bullets per minute through the midday air with a PKT machine gun. The swarm had moved behind a tree line by the time he determined the correct lead and moved his fire into the flight path. 9 dinner plate-sized targets can be acquired, tracked, led, and engaged in 8 seconds, outpacing traffic on the highway. The geometry was not feasible. Each round was unsuccessful, although the BTR gunner had often practiced for this situation in simulators. The actual situation was different. Targets moved in a predictable manner during training. Every 2 seconds, the drones jerked up, down, left, and right like inebriated hummingbirds. The fiber optic wires that followed them were visible through his sight image, shimmering in the midday sun like spider silk. He made an effort to guide them appropriately, but it was like attempting to shoot a bird's shadow. It had already changed course by the time you aimed in that direction. The BTR commander struck the turret with his fist. The radios were still blocked, so he was unable to even report the miss. The Panzer S-1 air defense system at the rail junction had identified the 9 surviving drones. Using thermal imaging, even though they were now 4.2 kilometers away from the intercept, the tiny drone fingerprints were filtered out as ground clutter. by this cruise missile tracking radar. Using what was effectively an expensive telescope with guns attached, the operator manually tracked the approaching swarm while switching to electro-optical mode. Nevertheless, the Panzer would demonstrate that occasionally a single fortunate shot is sufficient. At 3,200 meters, the Panzer's twin to A38M autocannons commenced fire. Although the gunner wasn't attempting to hit specific drones, that would be equivalent to attempting to use a weapon to shoot mosquitoes. Rather, he used airburst detonation to set his 30mm shells. Every round was designed to detonate at a predetermined distance, shattering into 400 steel shrapnel fragments within a 4-meter sphere. He was building a wall of metal between the drones and their target at 5,000 rounds per minute at 2,900 meters. Drone 6 disappeared in an orange blaze. Drone 11 detonated 3 seconds later. The 7 drones that survived instantly dispersed in 3 dimensions. 1 maintaining altitude, but jinxing laterally, 3 diving to grass height, and 3 rising to 200 meters. The Panzer gunner was compelled to decide as a result. The Panzer was built to thwart threats that exhibit fairly predictable behavior, such as F-16s and Tomahawk cruise missiles. However, the gunner was confronted with a difficult decision as these drones moved like irate wasps. His computer suggested that he interact with the high group. Tracking them against the sky was simpler. However, he was trained to engage the closest threat first. He had the seconds to make up his mind, unaware that he had just made the same error that resulted in the destruction of another train 3 weeks prior. He selected the high group. He committed to the aim set by raising his barrels in the direction of the climbing group. Classic air defense error. Since the nearest threat has the least amount of time to respond, you always confront it first. Unfazed, the low-altitude group rushed for the train while the Panzer's guns tracked higher, pursuing the climbing drones. Although the gunner was aware of his mistake, he was unable to move quickly enough to correct it. His ideal engagement angle had already been exceeded by the low drones. However, the drones had to fly through more than one wall of lead. A platoon of Russian soldiers at Observation Post 7 increased their gunfire as they got closer to the railroads, 40 AK rifles shooting in unison. However, the shot was almost impossible. The drones were traveling at a speed of 27 meters per second perpendicular to their position. Each drone spent precisely 74 seconds in a soldier's sight picture at a distance of 200 meters. The average human reaction time is 0.5 seconds. It takes an additional 0.5 seconds to acquire and aim the target. The drone had already vanished by the time a soldier could pull the trigger. In the meantime, for unique drones that were 500 meters above the ground plummeted in the direction of the railroad tracks 800 meters behind the moving train. At the same time, they released their payload, charges of thermite that caught fire as they struck the rails. Thermite doesn't explode. It burns at 2,500 Celsius and is a combination of iron oxide and aluminum powder. At 1,370, railroad steel burns. In a matter of seconds, the thermite turned for sections of track into puddles of molten metal by eating through the rails like acid through paper. The Panther's barrels burned cherry red from continuous fire as the drones continued to approach. Before heat warps the rifling, modern autocannons may fire at their maximum pace for about 45 seconds. After then, accuracy is useless as rounds tumble rather than spin. The gunner was forced to stop firing in order to calm down. As a result, there was a 12-second window where the sky was clear during battle. 7 drones zipped through the opening, battery warnings flashing. The fight with headwinds and numerous route modifications caused power to run out faster than expected. Drone 3 showed 18%, Drone 7, 21%. It would take them an additional 30 seconds to reach the train, but they had around 20 seconds of powered flight remaining. Smoke from the thermite-started grass fires was transported across the battlefield by the afternoon wind. Thermal imaging can see through fog, rain, and darkness, but it cannot see smoke. The carbon particles absorb all infrared radiation wavelengths for crucial seconds. All Russian defensive posts lost visual contact. The drones hit the target through the cloud at a distance of 1,400 meters. Their cameras recorded the unique features of the train cars, including corrosion patterns, unit identification, and even the white stencil warning on Wagon 22, Class 1.1 explosive. The fiber optic cables were approaching their maximum length. They would automatically release at exactly 12,000 meters to prevent tangling. 10 seconds is the release time. 5.3 to the first cable was discharged 13 meters short using a simple spring-loaded device that was originally used for fishing reels. Drone 1 switches to battery power. If all goes as planned, there is currently 8% left, which might last for 18 seconds. The extra cables were released one after the other over a period of 3 seconds. Now, drones were to close to stop flying freely and susceptible to jamming, closing at 1.53 meters from contact and 27 meters per second. The train engineer could see them through his windscreen. 7 dark specks are rapidly growing larger against the afternoon sky. He slammed the throttle. 4 passed the mechanical stops, overriding all safety governors. The diesel engines immediately began to redline, but in fact, putting forth more effort made things worse. After losing traction, the driving wheels began to spin on the rails. Steel has a coefficient of friction of 0.78 when it is stationary, but as soon as the wheels start to slide, it drops to 0.5. He pushed harder, but instead of gripping the rails, the wheels polished. The train actually lost to kilometers per hour, but he persisted. The Panzer tried one final time, but the autocannons could not depress below -5 since the drones had reached their minimum range of 500 meters. The technology was designed to target cruise missiles and aircraft that approach from above rather than drones that skim the ground. $20 million worth of air defense equipment was defeated by simple trigonometry. The gunner could only watch his screen as 7 drones disappeared beneath his engagement envelope. Russian soldiers unleashed their full force at the final checkpoint. RPG-7 South, machine guns, and even AK rifles detonated as makeshift flak bursts. But the drones were accurately following the center line of the railroad tracks, while using the 600-meter train as cover from lateral fire. To hit the drones, the soldiers would have to fire through their own train. The geometry completely protected the attackers. Drone 3's battery completely ran out at a distance of 100 meters from the target, even though the motor suddenly stopped and the props were windmilling in vain. The drone's momentum carried it on. Before the aerodynamic drag could stop it, the dead drone would cover the remaining distance at 97 kilometers per hour with minimal air resistance. The operator computed this precisely. The drone would coast the final distance based just on physics. Using the last functional camera, the operator saw Russian combat engineers attempting to separate Wagon 22 as the train was moving. The link had less than 4,000 tons of strain at 56 kilometers per hour. The safety mechanism was specifically designed to never release under load in order to prevent catastrophic separation during routine operation. Bulldozers might as well have been pulling on a steel knot that the engineers were trying to disentangle. Fortunately, PKM shrapnel clipped Drone 9's power pack. It dropped into the wheat field for 100 meters short. 6 drones remain. The operators had budgeted for 60% losses from the start. They only needed for hits to finish the goal. The margin continued to be good. At 13:59, the lead drone collided with the coupler that connected the locomotive to the first wagon. The RPG-7 warhead detonated upon impact. The charge created a jet of molten copper that was moving at 2,800 meters per second, or 9 times the speed of sound. The massive steel coupling pin sheared in an instant. After that, there were 4 more impacts in precisely that order. Pressurized diesel was released when Wagon 3's fuel valve assembly exploded. The brake line of Wagon 7 snapped, locking the wheels of every trailing wagon. When Wagon 18's thin-skinned munitions car was hit directly, A sequence of secondary explosions started at 13:51 and 18 seconds. Wagon 22's ventilation system was compromised due to vibration damaged seals. 12 tons of TOS-1A thermobaric rockets in Wagon 22 have been progressively heating. The inner temperature rose above the auto-igniting mark of 447 C. Due to the impact of the warhead, the fuel-air mixture erupted as a result of a pressure wave. Moving at 3,000 meters per second, Wagons 20 through 24 simply disappeared, transforming into plasma. The explosion wave completely pulled Wagons 25 through 47 off the rails, flipping them end over end across the countryside. The mushroom cloud rose to a height of 1,400 meters. $4,800 worth of modified racing drones destroyed 127 million Russian military assets in less than 4 seconds. They also cut off the single rail connection that supplied 3 mechanized divisions, preparing for tomorrow's onslaught. For more amazing tales and little-known historical incidents, please subscribe to my channel, WW to Revealed, if you like this video.